Hi, everybody, Will here with Coach's Corner, brought to you by Canine Chronicle TV and Pro Plan. So sit back and listen to George, because he's going to make you listen to him for the next 15, 20 minutes.
Coach's Corner with Will Alexander and George Alston. Brought to you by Pro Plan and Canine Chronicle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Coach's Corner with George Alston. How are you today, George?
I'm doing pretty good. Since I saw you last, I passed the 85 mark,
Yep, you have.
and I still feel 45.
Oh, good.
It's I'm not that old. So this morning, I want to do a little history.
Okay.
I think it's something that nobody or very few people have ever realized that it happened. It was done. It is about the great dog man and handler, Frank Sabella.
Ah, yes.
Frank Sabella influenced the presentation of dogs that most people really don't understand. If you go back and you look at the way handlers used to show and the way they then started showing in the 70s and the 80s, there was a big change. I went and looked at some pictures. Well, let me go back. When I was working as an apprentice and I was on the Texas circuit, I was lucky enough to have dinner in a group with Frank Sabella. And Frank at that time, at that table, made the comment that people don't realize that they are part of the picture. They try to create elegance and make the dogs look pretty, but they forget that they're part of the picture also. And this sort of went over everybody's head, but I thought about this. And over the years, I watched handlings change. More so on the West Coast to begin with, because that's where Frank Sabella went. But his first person he influenced was Ann Rogers Clark. And I went back and looked at pictures. Unfortunately, Westminster Kennel Club has taken those pictures off of their website, which I think is it used to be great. You could go in and see all the Best in Show winners' pictures, and you used to be able to go in and see all the juniors' pictures or whatever, and those people that turn out to be great handlers. And they just took them off about 6 months ago, so I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, there was a picture of Ann Rogers Clark going Best in Show with Wilbur White Swan, and she's sitting back on two knees on her haunches, trying to sort of get behind the toy poodle. And 2 years later, she went Best in Show with Fawn Claire Festoon. And she was doing the same thing with the mini poodle. And Frank Sabella, about that time, came into her life. He brought a dog for her to show. He was a professional dancer on Broadway. And all of a sudden, she goes Best in Show 2 years later with little sister, Chapacon's little sister. She's kneeling on one knee, her elbow on that knee, holding the dog. She is now probably a foot to a foot and a half away from the dog. Her arms are straight, and she's kneeling tall and elegant. An absolute change. I said, oh my God. And so I saw, um, I talked to a good friend of mine, Wood Warnall, who worked for Ricky Shazudian. And they, at one time, worked for and did the trimming for Ben Brown. Ben Brown was a great handler in California. And Woody went to Ben and said, how can I be better? And Ben said, well, you work for Ricky, so you show like Ricky does, because you're going to have to cover his dogs. The dogs are going to accept you better. But if you really want to be a good handler or a great handler, go watch Frank Sabella. And Woody did. And Woody was one of the first ones that, being a large person, large man, was elegant in the way he presented his dogs, in the way he used his hands, as the way he got away from his dogs. There were other handlers also out there at that time that were influenced. Corky Vroom was was influenced, not knowing he was being influenced, but he changed his method of showing. Bruce Schultz, great dog man, also was a very elegant person, showing his dogs, not hovering over them, looking like they're going to jump on top of them, like most of the working dog handlers and whatever. But it didn't start to seep into the East Coast. Also on the West Coast was Dick Webb, a great setter handler. And if you notice, if you go back and look at some of his pictures, he is changing from trying to hide behind his Irish setter to kneeling tall on one knee with his arms stretched out with the elbows not bent, presenting the dog and saying, here it is, attempting to create a picture that would match the dog.
Right. The full picture. I get that. Yeah.
And the thing is, people don't realize that they are part of they themselves are part of the picture that they're trying to create. I think a lot of the handlers today have lost that. And they look like when you look at these pictures in the magazines, half of them look like they're going to try to jump on top of their dogs or whatever. Now, it then started to come into the East Coast. Now, in the beginning, Frank Sabella went over there in the early 60s, went to California. But it didn't start to come into the East Coast until the 70s. Really. And the person who did this and was very instrumental in this was a handler by the name of Dick Baum. Dick Baum came from Arizona, and he he specialized in boxers and Dobermans, and he mainly boxers. And he changed the style of showing a boxer, just absolutely unbelievable. If you go back and look at some of the great boxers and the ones that were shown like Bangaway, I'm sorry, those handlers look like Nate Levine that showed Bangaway. I mean, he didn't look anything elegant at all. He was just there. Here I am. I'm on top of my dog. My dog's going to stand there, damn it. There's no elegance. There's no use of the hands or whatever. Same thing in shepherds. You had Ernie Loeb. I don't know whether you ever watched Ernie Loeb's show, A German
No, only as
Shepherd,
a judge. I only remember as a
but
judge.
there was no elegance in there whatsoever. It was same thing with the working dogs. So where Dick Baum changed the way working dogs were presented. And you would see like a great handler, Vic Capone. All of a sudden, here he is showing Great Danes and Bloodhounds, and he's standing as far away as his arms would get him away from the dog and standing and looking elegant. And all this comes from Frank Sabella. Frank Sabella told me one time I was working as assistant for Bill Trainer, and he came east, and I ended up going best in show with an English setter, and Frank happened to be in the ring. He wasn't. He was very nice and congratulated me and everything. And he said, "Young man," he says, "spend some money and have your sleeves shortened on your jacket. They're covering your hands, and your hands are what shows off your dog. It makes if you shorten your jacket so that your wrist shows some, then your hands will be more expressive in presenting your dog instead of the jacket covering half of your hand, which is terrible."
No, I
And
get that because when you present a dog, it's like you taught me if you're staring at something, everybody stares at it. Or people will stop and stare at it. If you stare at something good in your dog and you're holding your dog's head in your hand, your eyes go to the hand, go to the head.
yeah, well, the way he put it to me, he says, think of a a salesperson in a jewelry shop, showing you a piece of jewelry or china or something like that he's trying to sell, and he's using it, holding it in his hands. You don't want to see his coat covering his hands. He said it is the same thing. So what happens is there are certain handlers that think out of the box. The fact that Ben Brown was a great handler on the West Coast, and he would watch trends in handling. And that's the reason why he told Woody Warnall, a great handler. I understand he's judging now, so I think that's a great thing. In fact, he moved about 20 miles from me here on the Eastern Shore. He knows where God's country is. And but another great one that was affected on the East Coast was Johnny Brennan. And Johnny Brennan copied Frank Sabella to the T as far as presentation. One of the great poodle handlers, Wendell Salmon, said that, told me when I was doing some history on an article for Amy Fernandez, that Johnny Brennan was a great one. And he always showed kneeling tall on one knee and looked elegant. Your old boss, Bobby Stebbins, was one of the handlers that thought out of the box. And he adopted that style. But people don't realize how much Bobby changed the presentation of some breeds. It was because of Bobby Stebbins that golden retrievers are shown exactly the same way as they are today. In the old days, back in the old days, I'm thinking, yes, I am that old. Um,
But you don't feel that old.
I don't feel that old. No, I'm just a young whippersnapper. But in the old days, golden retrievers were shown like Irish setters.
Yeah.
They took the leads off them. They showed them with their hands on the head, just like an Irish setter, and or an English
Some
setter.
still do.
What
Some still do.
do they?
Yeah.
Okay, but Bobby started showing golden retriever like a Doberman. And he'd stand in front and bait him and hold him up on the lead and get that neck arched and the whole thing. And all of a sudden, my old boss, Bill Trader, comes along with the next great one. That after Jake, it was forget the dog's name,
Gold Rush Charlie.
Charlie,
Yeah.
but he showed him like that. When I worked for Bill Trader, we showed him like an Irish setter. So the bill changed. So this is how things can change. Bobby also, I think, was influenced a little bit by Frank Sabella because Doberman handlers used to stand real close to their dogs. Bobby Stebbins, when he showed a Doberman, he stood far away from the dog as his arms would allow him.
Yeah. Well,
I think it was all conducive to Frank Sabella. And what brought it to the East Coast was Dick Baum arriving on the East Coast, beating people in the ring, and people look and say, hey, how can I be better? And they learned the art of presentation. Unfortunately, that art of presentation has been lost. We're not seeing the elegance in the handling.
oh, there are still some.
To a certain point, yes. And I'm not going to go down and mention anybody's names that is currently showing dogs because I don't feel that that is correct thing to do. I talk about people that have stopped showing dogs. But yes, there are still a few, but there are still a lot of handlers that don't think about them being part of the picture.
Yeah, I don't know if I entirely agree. I'm at more shows than you, but I think some of the handlers are really good, especially in the ring at presenting now. There's some of their aspects I'd like to improve on, but there's a lot of really in the ring good dog handlers. Some breed specific things need to change a bit, I think, but overall, I think they're doing a pretty good job. So,
Well, yes, there are ones out there that, but I think if I just thought I would bring up a little history.
oh, there's no question Frank influenced.
And I think,
all of us.
and there was this great handler that I think influenced, especially on the West Coast, but it seeped into the East Coast.
Oh yeah.
I mean, even to handlers like Bobby Barlow, great dog, a great friend of mine. He changed his method of presentation, and he worked for Tommy Glassford and showed Tommy Glassford's style until Frank Sabella came along.
No, it was definitely Frank. Definitely influenced us all. His style and his carriage and his presentation. It changed the way we all looked at things because he was more of he was an artist. He was really an artist, but he was a very rhythmic. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, he was a dancer. I
Right.
mean, he his method of showing dogs was he choreographed what he did with his dog in the ring. I think
Oh, there's no question.
one of the most beautiful jobs of presentation of a large dog was Frank Sabella with Command Performance going best in show at Madison Square Garden.
Yep. Oh, there's moments that are going to live forever that Frank gave us. So.
So that's that's my save for Coach's Corner for this week.
Well, that was a good one, George. And you're right; he did influence us all. And you can even look at the ring now, and see Frank's influence. So.
Well, yes, you can. I mean, there, there, um, there's some poodle handlers here on the East Coast still show the reflection. I'm not going to use names because
No, I have to stay away from
they're
that.
still in competition,
Right.
but that you can see Frank's influence on those, and that was his main breed was poodles.
Yeah.
But he showed a lot of different breeds. Also, people don't realize he showed a German Shepherd bitch that put into the top 10 working dogs. And, people don't realize that how good a dog man and how good a handler he was. And there was a lady that had German Shepherds on the West Coast that showed her own German Shepherds, and you could see her style changed after Frank Sabella showed that German Shepherd bitch.
Well, he added style to whatever he showed. That's for sure.
Okay, that's
All
it.
right, just like the style here on Coach's Corner. All right, George. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to next month. I got to come up with something else.
And you will.
I've already started to get a couple of questions, and I'm sure you've got some questions. We got to have some people send some questions in. The next one I'm going to try to do is a real serious thing on training your dog as a special.
Well, that's a good one. Excellent. So next week, Coach's Corner, or next month, we're going to hear about training your dog for a specials career.
Yes.
Thanks, George.
Okay, bye.
Talk about style. Thanks, George. All right, guys. See you next time here on the Coach's Corner.